My brother-in-law locked our 12-year-old daughter in a walk-in freezer for exposing what was happening at his wedding. So we fought back until he weaponized CPS and the school system against us. But then we documented everything and turned his own biggest strength into the thing that destroyed him. Last Saturday, my wife took our daughter to her cousin's wedding at a fancy hotel, and that's the last time I ever saw my baby girl as I knew her. I could have called off work to attend, but I find my wife's side of the family to be extremely insufferable, so I turned down the invite. Around 3 hours into their reception, my phone started buzzing harder than a girl's toy in a long-distance relationship. It was my wife. She was literally sobbing and gasping for air while trying to get the words out. Emma's hurt was all she repeated over and over. David, my BIL, a 38-year-old man, grabbed our 12-year-old daughter and locked her in a walk-in freezer. She sounded so hysterical, and I could hear shouting and commotion in the background. My blood went cold, and I knew I needed to get there before I did something I'd regret. When I burst through the ballroom doors, I could hear David's voice booming across the room. My wife was on the floor holding our daughter in her arms, who reeked of fish and had an apron wrapped around her shoulders. David was standing over them, yelling about proper wedding etiquette and not ruining special days. But as soon as he saw me, his face went white. Wait, I can explain, he said, voice shaking. All I wanted to do was beat him until his brains was minced meat on the carpet. But I knew I had to set a good example for my daughter. So instead, I scooped Emma into my arms and tried to do breathing exercises with her. After 5 minutes, she was still hyperventilating and complained about her chest hurting. So I rushed her to the nearest urgent care. It was more important than dealing with Bill, at least for now. The doctor said she was okay physically, just severely traumatized, and that's when my wife finally told me the whole story. Apparently, Emma, our daughter, and all the younger cousins were sitting at the kids' table when my wife had to use the bathroom. That's when Emma noticed something happening in the hallway. The groom, Brian, had cornered one of the bridesmaids against a wall while she was crying, rubbing his greedy hands all over her chest. Emma, being the sweet protective kid she is, went to my wife and quietly told her she saw Brian making Melissa cry in the hallway and asked if everything was okay. David overheard this and exploded, calling Emma a lying brat who was trying to destroy the wedding. In response, Emma said Brian shouldn't hurt girls if he wants a good marriage. David completely snapped and grabbed Emma's arm so hard it left bruises and dragged out while she screamed for help. My wife tried to lunge at them, but her dad pinned her back and said, "Let the men handle things." So she was forced to watch as Emma was hauled down to the kitchen and thrown into the walk-in freezer. My wife tried to dial 911, but her dad took her phone away and told her if she said another word, she'd be thrown in too. It wasn't until 2 minutes later when she managed to tell one of the bigger teenagers what was going on, that they could pry the door open and let her out. I left Emma with my mom and went back to confront him and found the bride's parents already there. So I told everyone exactly what happened. David tried to say Emma was attacking the groom, but I asked, "Where are the marks from Emma's attack?" And he had nothing to say. The kids from the table backed Emma up saying, "We begged Uncle David to stop, but he wouldn't listen." None of the adults did anything. As I glanced around the room, everyone was avoiding all eye contact with me, but I knew from the redness in their face that the kids were telling the truth. Rage boiled my blood, but I held back from doing anything because I was ready to play the long game. The next week was hell. Emma wouldn't sleep alone and kept waking up screaming about being cold. She'd kick off her blankets in a panic, thinking she was trapped. My wife and I took turns staying with her, holding her until she fell back asleep. I used my vacation days to be home. We kept the thermostat at 75 degrees, but Emma still wore sweaters and wrapped herself in blankets. David went radio silent, but I knew he was planning something. Men like him always have a next move. Sunday rolled around, and we had to go to my mother-in-law's for dinner. It's a weekly thing, and my wife didn't want to break tradition. Said it would make things worse. I agreed, but only if David wasn't there. My wife called ahead, and her mom promised he was visiting friends out of town, something about a golf weekend. We showed up, and Emma stuck to my side like glue. She hadn't let go of my hand since we got out of the car. The house felt different, quieter, tense. My mother-in-law kept giving us weird looks. Her lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. She barely spoke to Emma, which was unusual. She always doted on her only granddaughter. After dinner, she pulled my wife into the kitchen to help with dishes. I could hear hushed urgent whispers through the door. I wandered upstairs to use the bathroom. The attic door was open, which was strange. My mother-in-law never goes up there anymore. Bad knees from a fall last year. The pull-down ladder was extended. I poked my head up and saw boxes everywhere. Dust motes dancing in the light from the single bulb. One was tipped over with papers spilling out like guts from a wound. I climbed up to fix it and noticed bank statements. Lots of them. All in my mother-in-law's name, but the signatures looked off. Too neat. Too practiced. I grabbed a handful and started reading. Withdrawals of 500 here, 1,000 there, all going back 3 years. The memo line said things like home repairs and medical bills, but I knew for a fact my mother-in-law hadn't done any major repairs. The roof still leaked in the guest bedroom, and she's on Medicare, always bragging about her supplemental insurance. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. I shoved the papers in my jacket and turned around. David was standing there, not out of town after all. His face was red and sweaty despite the cool evening. He saw the open box, and his eyes went dark. Dangerous. He told me I had no business snooping around his mother's house. His voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the threat underneath. I said it was my wife's mother too. He stepped closer, and I could smell whiskey on his breath, see the slight sway in his stance. He grabbed my wrist hard, same way he grabbed Emma. His fingers dug in, trying to establish dominance. He said if I showed anyone those papers, he'd tell the cops I planted them, that I was trying to frame him because of the wedding thing. His breath was hot on my face, reeking of alcohol and desperation. I yanked my arm away and headed for the stairs. He blocked me. We stood there staring at each other. I could see him calculating, weighing his options. Then Emma called for me from downstairs. Her voice was shaky, scared. She'd been alone too long. David smiled, a cold predatory thing, and stepped aside. I went down and grabbed my family. Told my wife I felt sick and we needed to leave. She didn't question it, just gathered our things while I carried Emma to the car. In the car, I showed her the statements. She went pale, her hands shaking as she flipped through them. We both knew David had power of attorney. Her dad set it up before he died, back when David was still pretending to be a responsible son. But stealing from his own mother was low even for David. My wife wanted to go straight to the police. I said we needed more proof first. David would just lie his way out like always. He had connections, lawyers who owed him favors. We needed to be smart about this, patient, thorough. For Emma's sake and for my mother-in-law's, we had to play this perfectly. The next few days were rough. Emma started having panic attacks at school. The nurse called me Tuesday saying she was hyperventilating in the bathroom. I picked her up and she clung to me the whole ride home. That night, David started his campaign. My wife's cousin texted her screenshots from Facebook. David was posting about how kids today make up stories for attention, how some children have overactive imaginations that need professional help. He never mentioned Emma by name, but everyone knew who he meant. Wednesday morning, I got a call from my mother-in-law. She sounded confused, worried. Said David told her Emma had been seeing things that weren't there, making up stories about people. She asked if we'd considered therapy. I told her Emma was fine, that David was lying. She got quiet then said, maybe we should skip Sunday dinner for a while. Let things calm down. I knew David had gotten to her. By Thursday, 3 different relatives had called my wife asking if Emma was okay, if she was having problems at school, if maybe she needed to talk to someone. David was working fast, planting seeds of doubt. My wife cried that night after Emma went to bed, said she felt like her whole family was turning against us. I held her and promised we'd fix this. Friday, I took off work early, told my boss I had a family emergency. I drove to David's office, the one his dad left him. It's in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax place. Not exactly prestigious, but David acts like it's a downtown high-rise. His car wasn't there, but his secretary was. Teresa, an older woman who'd worked for David's father. I told her I needed to drop off some family documents. She let me wait in his office. I snooped around while she answered phones. His desk was locked, but the filing cabinet wasn't. I found more bank statements, not just his mother's. There were accounts for 2 elderly clients, same pattern of withdrawals, same forged signatures. I took pictures with my phone. Then I heard Teresa say David was on his way up. I shoved everything back and sat down like I'd been waiting patiently. David walked in and froze when he saw me. His face went through about 5 emotions before settling on fake friendliness. He asked what brought me by. I said I wanted to talk about Emma, about the wedding. He sat behind his desk, using it like a barrier between us. Said it was all a misunderstanding, that Emma misunderstood what she saw, that Brian was just comforting Melissa after she'd had too much champagne. I asked about the freezer. He said Emma was hysterical, that he was trying to calm her down. The kitchen was quiet and cool. He thought it would help. I laughed. Actually laughed in his face, asked if he really expected anyone to believe that. His mask slipped for a second. I saw the real David underneath, the one who locks children in freezers and steals from old ladies. He leaned forward and said I should be careful, that Emma was already having problems at school, that people were starting to talk, that maybe child services should get involved if we couldn't handle our daughter's mental health issues. The threat was clear. Back off or he'd try to take Emma away. I stood up and left without another word, but I'd gotten what I came for. The pictures on my phone were proof of a pattern. Now I needed more. That weekend, my wife called her mom's sister. Aunt Linda lived 2 states away, but she knew all the family dirt. My wife asked about David's ex-girlfriend, the one from before his marriage. Linda got real quiet, then said we should come visit. She had something to show us. We drove out Saturday morning. Emma stayed with my parents. She didn't need to hear what we might learn. Linda met us at a diner near her house. She looked nervous, kept checking over her shoulder. She told us about Jessica, David's ex from 5 years ago. How they dated for 2 years before she suddenly left town. No explanation. Just gone. But Linda stayed in touch. Jessica told her things, dark things, about David's temper, about the time he locked her nephew in a car trunk during a family barbecue. The kid was only 7, had asked David why he was being mean to Aunt Jessica. Linda gave us Jessica's number, said she'd been waiting for someone to ask. We called from the car. Jessica answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was cautious until my wife explained who we were. Then the words poured out. She told us about the trunk incident, how David had laughed when they finally got the boy out, how he'd said kids needed to learn respect. She told us about the emotional abuse, the gaslighting, how he'd convinced her family she was unstable. Sound familiar? Jessica said she'd testify if we needed her to. Said she'd been waiting years for someone to stop him. She gave us the name of another ex. Sarah said Sarah had stories too. We thanked her and hung up. My wife was crying again. Angry tears this time. Her brother had been doing this for years and nobody stopped him. Sunday, we skipped dinner at my mother-in-law's. Monday, David escalated. The school called saying someone had reported concerns about Emma's home environment. Said they'd received an anonymous tip about possible abuse. The counselor wanted to meet with us. I knew it was David, but I couldn't prove it. We met with Mrs. Patterson that afternoon. Emma had to miss soccer practice. Mrs. Patterson was nice enough, but I could see the suspicion in her eyes. She asked about Emma's behavior at home, about any recent trauma, about our disciplinary methods. My wife explained about the wedding. Mrs. Patterson took notes, but I could tell she'd already heard David's version. She said she'd have to document everything, that there would be follow-up meetings. Emma heard that and started crying, asked if she was in trouble. We assured her she wasn't, but I could see the damage being done. Tuesday night, we found out David had been busy in other ways. My wife's phone buzzed with a text from her cousin, a link to an Instagram account. The username was close to Emma's, but not quite right. The posts were disturbing. Weird poems about death and violence, photos of knives and pills with emo captions. The account was following Emma's classmates. Some had already followed back thinking it was her. I screenshot everything before reporting the account, but the damage was done. Wednesday, Emma came home in tears. Kids at school were asking about her creepy posts. One girl's mom had called the school. Emma didn't understand what was happening. We had to explain that someone was pretending to be her online. She asked why anyone would do that. We didn't have a good answer. Thursday, David made his next move. A process server showed up at our door with papers. David was suing us for defamation and emotional distress, claiming we'd been spreading lies about him since the wedding. The amount he wanted was insane, $15,000. But here's the kicker. He'd listed Emma as a defendant too, a 12-year-old child. My wife threw the papers across the room. I picked them up and read the details. David was claiming Emma had assaulted Brian at the wedding, that we'd coached her to lie about it. I called a lawyer friend. Justin said it was harassment, that no judge would take it seriously, but we'd still have to respond, still have to pay for representation. It was death by 1,000 cuts. David was trying to bleed us dry financially and emotionally, make us too tired to fight back. But he didn't know I'd been documenting everything. Every post, every call, every interaction. I had a file growing thicker by the day. Friday, my wife discovered something disturbing. She'd been going through old family videos on her laptop, looking for happy memories to show Emma. Remind her that her family wasn't all bad. She found footage from last Christmas. David had been filming with his phone during dinner. But in the background, you could see him pointing the camera at Emma when he thought no one was looking, zooming in on her. We checked other videos. He was in the background of most of them, always watching Emma, always recording. My wife felt sick, said she needed air. I looked through more videos while she stood on the porch, found one from Emma's birthday party. David in the corner, phone out, filming while Emma opened presents. Another from Easter. David recording Emma hunting for eggs, always lurking, always watching. It made my skin crawl. What kind of grown man secretly films his 12-year-old niece? Saturday, we got proactive. I called Jessica again, asked if she'd noticed David recording kids when they dated. She went quiet then said yes. Said he had folders on his computer, videos of his cousins, kids, neighbors' children. Nothing overtly inappropriate but creepy, obsessive. She'd asked about it once and he'd blown up. Said she was making innocent family videos seem dirty, Classic David. Turn it around. Make you feel guilty for noticing. We needed those recordings he'd made of Emma. If he was trying to catch her in lies, he might have captured something else. Something that proved his pattern of behavior. But his devices would be locked down tight. We needed another way. That's when my wife remembered something. David always backed up to cloud storage. And years ago, when he'd helped set up her mom's computer, he'd used his own account. His mom probably still had access. Sunday, we bit the bullet and went to dinner. David was there, smug as ever. He kept making comments about children who lie. About parents who enable them. My mother-in-law looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Emma barely ate, just pushed food around her plate. After dinner, my wife volunteered to help her mom with computer issues, said the email wasn't working right. They went to the den while I kept David busy in the living room. He tried to bait me, mentioned the lawsuit, asked if we'd found a lawyer yet, said it was a shame when families had to involve the courts. I just nodded, let him talk. He got cockier as he drank, started bragging about a case he'd won, some elderly client who'd tried to change their will. David had contested it, proved the old man wasn't competent. The family had to split everything with David's client. He smiled as he told it, proud of manipulating a dying man's wishes. My wife came back looking pale but triumphant. She'd found the cloud account, downloaded files to a thumb drive while David was distracted. We made excuses and left early. David called after us about seeing us in court. Emma asked what he meant. We told her not to worry about it. At home, we went through the files. Hours of video. Emma at family gatherings, at the park, at school events David had attended, and then we found it. A video from the wedding. David had been recording before the incident. The phone must have been in his pocket, still capturing audio. You could hear Emma tell my wife about Brian and Melissa. Hear David's explosion. Hear Emma's screams as he dragged her away. The phone must have shifted because suddenly there was partial video, shaky, mostly obscured. But you could make out David's hand on Emma's arm, her feet dragging as he pulled her, the kitchen door slamming, and then his voice muffled but distinct, telling her she needed to learn to keep her mouth shut. That little girls who told tales got what they deserved. We had him, but we needed more. The financial stuff was separate from the assault. We needed both to bury him completely. Monday, I took another sick day. Drove to the courthouse and pulled property records. David's house was mortgaged to the hilt. 3 refinances in 5 years. Where was all that money going? His car was leased. His office was rented. He dressed nice, but not that nice. Then I remembered the gambling. My wife had mentioned years ago that David liked poker. Maybe liked it too much. I made some calls, found out David was a regular at underground games, high-stakes stuff. The kind where you could lose $5 in a night. The kind where they don't take IOUs. One guy, Billy, used to work with me. He ran book on the side. Said David owed people money. Serious people. Said David had been scrambling lately, desperate for cash. That explained the theft. He was stealing from his mother to pay gambling debts. Tuesday, the school called again. More concerns about Emma. Someone had sent an anonymous email with links to the fake Instagram, claiming we weren't monitoring our daughter's internet use. We had another meeting with Mrs. Patterson. This time, she was less friendly. Said the reports were piling up, that she might need to involve social services. Emma had to sit in the hall while we talked. I could see her through the window, hunched over, looking small. We showed Mrs. Patterson the screenshots proving the account was fake, showed her when it was created, how it was clearly an adult trying to sound like a child. She took notes, but I could see the doubt. Once that seed was planted, it was hard to dig out. David was winning this part of the war, making us look unstable, neglectful, making Emma look disturbed. Wednesday, my wife's sister called. Madison had been Switzerland up till now, not taking sides, but she'd noticed something. Money missing from their mom's account. Checks made out to cash that their mom didn't remember writing. She'd confronted David and he'd blown up. Said she was calling their mother senile. Said maybe she needed to be evaluated for dementia. Classic David. Attack when cornered. Madison was shaken. Asked if we'd noticed anything similar. We told her about the bank statements, the pattern going back years. She went quiet then said there was more. Their mom had changed her will recently. Left everything to David. Cut everyone else out completely. Said it was because David was the only one who cared about her. Madison had been suspicious, but their mom insisted it was what she wanted. Now she wondered if David had manipulated her, threatened her maybe, or convinced her the rest of the family was against her. We needed to move fast. David was escalating because he was desperate. The walls were closing in and he knew it, but cornered animals are dangerous. Thursday proved that. Emma didn't come home from school. The bus driver said she never got on. The school said she'd left with the other kids. My wife called everyone we knew. I drove around the neighborhood, checking the park, the library, anywhere she might go. Then my phone rang. David. He said Emma was safe. That she'd come to him upset about all the tension at home. That maybe she should stay with family who didn't fill her head with lies. I told him to put her on the phone. I could hear Emma in the background saying she wanted to go home. David said she was confused. That we'd call the police. He laughed and said, "Go ahead." He was her uncle. She'd come willingly. He was just trying to help. I drove to his house breaking every traffic law. My wife called 911 from her car. We arrived at the same time as the cops. David answered the door all smiles, told the officers it was a family misunderstanding, that Emma had texted him asking for a ride. He showed them texts from Emma's phone, but Emma didn't have her phone. We'd taken it away after the Instagram incident. David's face changed when we said that. The cops asked to see Emma. She was in the living room crying. She ran to us and held on tight, told the officers David had been waiting outside school, said her mom sent him to pick her up. She'd believed him because he was family. He'd taken her phone from her backpack and texted himself, then deleted the messages from her phone and gave it back. The cops took statements. David stuck to his story, but it was falling apart. They said they'd file a report, that we should consider a restraining order. That night, Emma slept between us. She kept waking up asking if the doors were locked, if David could get in. We assured her she was safe, but I stayed awake listening for sounds. Friday, we filed for the restraining order. The judge granted a temporary one based on the police report. David would be served within 24 hours. It felt like progress, but I knew it was just paper. Paper doesn't stop a desperate man. Saturday, my wife's cousin called. The one who'd first sent the Instagram links. She'd been doing some digging. Found David's ex-wife on Facebook. The one nobody talked about. The marriage that lasted less than 2 years before she fled to another state. Christina was willing to talk. Said she'd been waiting for this call for years. The stories she told made Jessica seem tame. David had locked her kid in a closet, his own stepson. Said the boy was disrespectful, needed to learn his place. She'd tried to leave, but David had threatened to ruin her. Said he'd make sure she never saw her son again. He'd filed false reports with CPS. Claimed she was an unfit mother, hired a PI to follow her, planted substances in her car, then called in an anonymous tip. She'd struck the charges, but it cost everything she had. Finally, she'd run in the middle of the night, started over 3 states away, changed her name. David had still found her, sent photos of her son at his new school. The message was clear. She'd stayed quiet after that. Christina had documents, police reports, court filings, hospital records from when her son had panic attacks, a paper trail of David's abuse. She overnight expressed copies to us, said to use them however we needed, said it was time someone stopped him. The package arrived Monday. 50 pages of David's greatest hits, a pattern spanning years, always the same. Lock up kids who challenged him, destroy anyone who fought back. Tuesday, the restraining order was served. David called my wife's mom screaming about betrayal, about family turning on family, said we'd regret this. My mother-in-law called my wife crying, said David told her we were trying to steal her money, that we'd planted those bank statements, that we wanted her house. My wife tried to explain, but her mom hung up. David had poisoned that well completely. Wednesday, things got weird. I noticed a car following me to work. Same car outside when I left for lunch. I got the license plate, had Justin run it. Rental car, paid for in cash. Could have been anyone, but I knew it was David or someone he'd hired. That night, we got takeout. I was too paranoid to cook, kept checking the windows. Emma noticed and asked if the bad man was coming. We said no, but I could see she didn't believe us. Thursday, the school called again. This time, it was good news. Mrs. Patterson had done some investigating, found out the anonymous reports all came from the same IP address, traced it to David's office. She apologized for the stress, said she'd document everything for our lawyer. Finally, someone else saw through David's act, but he wasn't done. That night, our doorbell camera caught him driving by slowly, 3 times between midnight and dawn, just letting us know he was watching. Friday, my wife's grandmother called. David's grandmother too. She was 93 and sharp as a tack. Said she'd been watching the family drama unfold, had some things to say. Turns out David had tried this before, 20 years ago with a younger cousin. Nobody believed the kid then. The family covered it up. Grandma had receipts, old letters, journal entries, a pattern going back to when David was a teenager. She'd kept quiet to preserve family peace, but not anymore. We visited her Saturday. She lived in assisted living, but still had all her papers, boxes of them. She showed us a letter from David's high school. He'd locked a classmate in a supply closet, got suspended, but Daddy made it go away. Another incident in college. A girlfriend who'd filed charges then dropped them. Daddy's money again. Grandma said she'd tried to warn people, but the family always protected David. Always made excuses. She gave us everything. Said she was too old to care about family politics. Said Emma deserved better than what she got. We left with 3 boxes of ammunition. That night, we spread it all out on the dining room table. Police reports, bank statements, medical records, witness statements. 25 years of David being David and getting away with it. Until now, Sunday, David made his biggest mistake. There was a family barbecue at the park. We weren't going, but Madison was. She called us afterward, hysterical. David had shown up hammered, started ranting about ungrateful family, about lies and conspiracies, about how he'd given everything to his mother and this was how she repaid him. Then he'd let slip about the money, how he'd only taken what he deserved, how the old bat had more than she needed anyway. 30 people heard him, including his mother. She'd been bringing potato salad when he said it, dropped the whole bowl, started crying. David tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Madison recorded the whole thing on her phone. David admitting to theft in front of 36 witnesses. He realized what he'd done and tried to grab Madison's phone. She ran to her car and left. David followed, screaming threats. Other family members had to physically restrain him. Monday, my mother-in-law called, voice small and broken, apologized for not believing us, said she'd looked at her accounts, really looked, found withdrawals she didn't remember, checks she didn't write, $40,000 over 3 years, her retirement savings, the money she'd inherited from her sister, gone. All signed by David. She wanted to press charges. We told her about everything else we'd found. She cried harder, said she'd failed as a mother. We told her it wasn't her fault. David had everyone fooled. Tuesday, we took everything to the police. 3 boxes of evidence, witness statements from Jessica, Christina, and Grandma, the video from the wedding, the bank records, Madison's recording from the barbecue. The detective's eyes got wider as we laid it all out. Said this was the most comprehensive case file he'd seen from civilians. Said David had made a lot of enemies. We gave him Christina's contact info. She was ready to testify about the false imprisonment of her son. Wednesday, David was arrested at his office. Teresa called us, voice shaking. Said the police had taken computers, files, everything. Said they'd found more victims, other elderly clients with mysterious withdrawals. David's house of cards was collapsing. He made bail by Thursday, but the damage was done. His face was in the paper. Local attorney arrested for elder abuse and theft. His uncle fired him that afternoon. Clients started calling demanding their files. Friday, we got a call from David's lawyer, Scott something, smooth talker. Said David wanted to make a deal, drop the charges and he'd leave town, never contact us again, sign away any claim to his mother's inheritance. We laughed. Actually laughed. Told him to check the evidence. David was going to prison. No deals. Scott said we'd regret this, that David had resources. We hung up. Let him make his threats. We had the truth on our side. Saturday, David did something stupid. Violated the restraining order. Showed up at Emma's soccer game, stood at the edge of the field watching. Other parents noticed, felt uncomfortable. One dad, Gerald, approached him, asked him to leave. David shoved him hard. Gerald's a contractor, 6'3" and solid muscle. He didn't shove back, but he didn't need to. 3 other dads surrounded David, told him to go. David looked around, realized he was outnumbered, left, but not before screaming that this wasn't over. We called the police from the field. They picked David up an hour later, back to jail. No bail this time. The judge called him a flight risk and a danger to a minor. David's lawyer argued, but the video from the wedding played in court. The judge watched David lock a 12-year-old in a freezer, watched him smile about it after. Bail denied. David would wait for trial behind bars. Emma heard the news and smiled for the first time in weeks, asked if it was really over. We said, almost. The trial took 3 months to schedule. David's lawyer tried every delay tactic, filed motion after motion, but the evidence was overwhelming. 15 witnesses testified. Jessica flew in from Portland. Christina drove 10 hours with her son, now 17 and ready to face his former stepfather. The kid was brave, told the court about hours locked in dark places, about David laughing when he cried, about his mom's tears. The jury looked sick. Madison testified about the barbecue incident, played the video for the court, David's own voice admitting to theft. His mother took the stand, frail but determined, detailed every forged check, every lying excuse. The prosecutor showed the jury $40,000 in fraudulent withdrawals. The defense had nothing. David took the stand against his lawyer's advice, tried to spin it all as misunderstandings. The prosecutor tore him apart, asked about each child he'd locked up, each elder he'd robbed. David's mask finally slipped. He screamed that they all deserved it, that children needed discipline, that his mother owed him for all he'd done. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elder abuse, theft, false imprisonment, child endangerment. The judge gave him 8 years, not enough but something. David screamed as they led him away, promised he'd get revenge, that we'd pay for this. The bailiff dragged him out still yelling. Emma watched from the gallery. Didn't flinch, didn't cry. Just watched the bad man get taken away. After the trial, things slowly improved. Emma started sleeping through the night. Stopped checking locks obsessively. My mother-in-law got her money back. Insurance covered most of it. The rest came from selling David's house. Turned out, he didn't own much. The gambling debts ate everything. His creditors came calling, but there was nothing left. David lost everything. His freedom, his family, his future, all for what? Pride? Greed? Some sick need to control? We still go to Sunday dinners. The family is smaller now. Some relatives chose David's side, said we'd overreacted. That family should forgive. We let them go. The ones who stayed are closer, bonded by shared trauma and survival. Emma plays with her cousins again, laughs again, but she's different, more cautious. More aware that monsters can wear familiar faces. We got her therapy. Good therapy. She's working through it. David's in state prison now. Will be for years. He writes sometimes long rambling letters about injustice, about family betrayal. We don't read them. Just forward them to the prosecutor in case he violates the no-contact order. His mother changed her will. Split everything equally among her children, except David. He gets nothing. She says it's the least she can do after failing to protect her grandchildren. We tell her it wasn't her fault. Predators are good at hiding. David had decades of practice. The other day, Emma asked if Uncle David could ever come back. We told her no, that the judge made sure of it, that even when he gets out, he can never come near her again. She nodded and went back to her homework. Just like that. Kids are resilient. But I still check the locks, still watch cars that follow too close, still wake up sometimes thinking I hear him at the door. Trauma lingers for all of us, but we won. That's what matters. David thought he could intimidate us into silence, thought he could destroy a 12-year-old girl for telling the truth. He was wrong. Emma's the hero of this story. She saw something wrong and spoke up. Even when the adults failed her, even when her own family turned against her, she told the truth. And eventually, finally, justice listened. We're okay now. Not the same, but okay. Emma plays soccer and gets straight A's. My wife started volunteering at a women's shelter. I coach Little League. Normal life stuff. We don't talk about David much. He's just a bad chapter in our family story. A cautionary tale about enabling abuse, about the cost of keeping quiet. Sometimes, Emma asks why he did it, why he hurt people. We don't have good answers. Some people are just broken, and they break others if we let them. But we didn't let him, not in the end. David's in a cell now thinking about what he lost. 8 years to think about every child he terrorized, every dollar he stole, every life he tried to ruin. Meanwhile, Emma's growing up strong and brave. She knows her voice matters, that speaking truth to power works, even when power is family, especially then. David taught her that. Not the lesson he intended, but the one she learned. And that's the best revenge of all.